When I came home from the hospital, my son and his wife were already moving in. I didn't argue, I just smiled. They had no idea who signed the mortgage. The day I came home from the hospital, the first thing I saw was my son carrying my television out of the living room. His wife was in the kitchen, emptying my drawers like she owned the place. Boxes were everywhere, my plates, my blankets, even my old photo albums. They didn't hear me at first. I stood at the doorway, gripping my hospital bag, watching them take over my home like I was already gone. When my son finally turned and saw me, he didn't look shocked. He looked annoyed. "You're back early," he said, as if I had ruined their schedule. His wife crossed her arms. "We thought you'd be staying at the rehab center longer." I didn't respond. I just walked in slowly, taking in the scene. They had already moved their clothes into the bedroom. They had placed their shoes by the door. They even unplugged my lamp. Anyone else would have exploded. But me? I simply smiled. Because while they acted like they owned the house, they had no idea. They didn't know whose name was on the mortgage. They didn't know who had signed every paper. They didn't know I was not as weak as they believed. My son followed behind me as I walked through the house, trying to block my path. "We're just helping," he said too quickly. His wife added, "Yes, we don't want you stressing. You need rest." Rest? They had taken over my bed, and I was supposed to rest on the couch. I didn't say a word. Silence scared them more than shouting ever could. I sat down slowly in my old armchair, the one they had pushed into a corner. "How long have you been here?" I asked quietly. My son cleared his throat. "A week. We thought it was best." Best for whom? I looked around. They weren't helping, they were settling. Claiming. Taking. His wife sat on the arm of the couch like she already owned it. "We can manage things now," she said proudly. "We're moving in permanently. You shouldn't be living alone anyway." I almost laughed. Permanently? They had no job, no plan, no savings, and they thought this house was their solution. I rubbed my hands together slowly. "Permanent," I repeated. Interesting. They didn't notice the tone. They didn't notice the hint. They didn't know I knew exactly what they were doing. That night, I pretended to be tired and went to bed early. They didn't know I heard everything. Through the thin walls, their whispers slipped through like secrets escaping. "Once we change the address and finish moving in, the house is basically ours," his wife said. "Your mom won't fight back." My son muttered, "She's too weak now. She'll be happy we're helping." Helping? I covered my mouth to stop myself from laughing. They thought my illness had made me blind, and rehab had made me soft. They forgot who kept the lights on in this family. Who paid the school fees? Who worked 2 jobs for years? Who bought this house, alone? Around midnight, I slipped out of bed and walked to the living room. I touched the wall gently, remembering the day I signed the papers. My hands were trembling back then, not from fear, but from pride. My son had no idea I kept the mortgage documents hidden in a place he would never look. He believed he could take advantage of me. He believed I was too weak to fight. But he was forgetting something important. I had survived much worse than disrespect. By morning, they were already planning changes. My son pointed at the dining table. "We'll get a bigger one," he said. His wife nodded. "This couch needs to go too. It's old." Old? That couch had survived more storms than their marriage ever would. I made myself tea, listening as they talked about repainting walls, switching bedrooms, and buying new furniture once the house is officially theirs. Each sentence made me calmer, not angrier. I had learned long ago that people reveal themselves when they think nobody is watching. I stirred my tea slowly. "And how will you pay for all that?" I asked. His wife lifted her chin. "The house will give us a good loan. Once everything is transferred." I nearly spit my tea out. Transferred? How? To whom? My son avoided my eyes. Mom, we just want what's best for the family. That was the moment I knew they weren't moving in. They were moving me out. They were planning to own my house without paying a single coin. I smiled again, slow and calm. Let me rest today, I said. We can talk more tomorrow. They agreed eagerly. They didn't know tomorrow was going to change everything. I spent most of the day in my room, not because I was weak, but because I needed quiet to think. The papers were still in the metal box under my bed, the mortgage, the deed, the bank letters. All in my name. Only my name. I opened the box and spread the documents on the bed. My fingers traced the signatures. My handwriting hadn't changed. I heard footsteps outside my door, followed by whispering. They were waiting. Waiting for the perfect moment to push me aside. They thought I was scared. They thought sickness had made me powerless. But real weakness is pretending you are strong by taking from others. Real strength is staying silent until the right moment. I placed the documents back in the box and locked it. The key sat in my palm, warm and familiar. That evening, I joined them for dinner. They were excited, smiling too much, talking too sweetly. My son asked, Mom, have you thought about letting us handle things now? I sliced my food slowly and said, oh yes. I've been thinking about everything. They relaxed. They thought they were winning. But they were not ready for what I was about to do next. The following morning, my son knocked on my door holding papers. His wife stood behind him, smiling too eagerly. Mom, we brought something for you to sign, he said. I sat up slowly, watching them like I was watching two children pretending to be adults. He handed me the papers. It's just to let the house be in all our names, he said casually. I flipped through the pages, blank forms, and signed, but ready for mischief. They thought I wouldn't read them. They thought my eyes were too tired, my mind too slow. Why now? I asked softly. His wife stepped forward. Because you need help, and we need stability. It's best for everyone. I set the papers on my lap and stared at them. They stared back, trying to hide their impatience. Let me think, I said. They left the room whispering, thinking they were halfway to victory. But I wasn't the one who needed thinking time. They were the ones running out of it. As soon as I heard their steps fade, I took the papers to the kitchen sink and burned them. Smoke curled upward like a quiet promise. They wanted ownership? They were about to learn the truth the hard way. Later that afternoon, they returned asking if I had made a decision. I opened the fridge calmly and poured myself water. I'm still thinking, I said. His wife's smile twitched. What's there to think about? Her tone slipped, revealing the impatience she had been hiding. We're doing you a favor, she added. Favor. The word echoed in my mind. My son folded his arms. Mom, you can't live alone. You need us. I turned slowly. Then why were you moving my belongings out before I even came home? They froze. Their eyes widened. They didn't know I had seen them. Or heard them. We were rearranging, my son blurted out. It wasn't like that. I took a sip of water. His wife swallowed hard. You're misunderstanding everything. But I understood perfectly. They weren't here to help me. They were here to secure their future with my house. I leaned against the counter. Don't rush, I said gently. We have plenty of time. That sentence relieved them, but if they knew what I was preparing, they would have packed their bags that instant. The next day, a letter arrived addressed to me from the bank. My son grabbed it before I could. I'll check it for you, he said, opening it without permission. He skimmed it, expecting something simple. Instead, his eyes widened. It says you paid off the entire mortgage, last year? He sounded shocked. His wife took the letter, reading it twice. Paid off, she whispered. Completely? I sat down at the table and nodded. Yes. I paid it off myself. They stared at me like I had suddenly grown wings. They had built their plan on the idea that I was struggling. That I was weak. That I depended on them. Now their fantasy was cracking. How? My son whispered. With your salary? I smiled. You'd be surprised what a disciplined person can do. He sank into a chair. His wife paced the kitchen, panicking quietly. So, if it's paid off, then, she whispered. I finished her sentence. Then the house belongs fully to whoever signed the mortgage. She looked up sharply. And who is that? I pulled out my key, walked to my room, and returned with the metal box. Their eyes followed it like prey watches a predator. I unlocked the box slowly, letting the sound of the metal click echo through the room. Their breathing grew heavy. I took out the thick envelope containing the original mortgage documents. I placed them gently on the table. My son and his wife hovered over them, eyes moving like they were reading a treasure map. And then they froze. My name. Printed clearly. Signed clearly. Not once. Not twice. But on every single page. My son swallowed hard. His wife stepped back. So, it's yours, she whispered. Only mine, I replied. The silence that followed was thick enough to cut. My son ran a hand over his face. But, we thought, I know what you thought, I said calmly. You thought I was weak. You thought I had nothing. You thought I would hand over everything because you moved your boxes in. His wife's voice trembled. We weren't trying to steal anything. I raised one eyebrow. She lowered her gaze. Of course they were. I slid the papers back into the box and closed it. Thank you for thinking I needed help, I said slowly. But I don't. They didn't respond. They couldn't. They had just realized the foundation of their plan was built on sand. That evening, the tone of the house changed. They no longer spoke loudly. They no longer marched around like owners. They walked lightly, like guests who weren't sure how long they were welcome. At dinner, they tried to be sweet again. My son served my food. His wife asked about my health with a suddenly soft voice. I ate quietly, watching their performance. They were trying to fix what they had broken. But some things can't be fixed with fake kindness. After dinner, they sat with me in the living room. Mom, my son said, we're sorry if we pushed too fast. His wife nodded eagerly. Yes, we were only trying to help. Help. The word sounded sour now. I folded my hands together. You moved into my home while I was still in the hospital, I said. You threw out my things. You planned to change the address. You wanted ownership. They lowered their heads. We made mistakes, my son whispered. We just wanted stability. I looked at him for a long moment. Stability doesn't come from taking someone else's home, I said. It comes from building your own. They didn't argue. They knew the truth. Tomorrow, I would show them consequences. The next morning, I woke up before both of them. I needed time to think clearly. They had apologized, but apology without change is just decoration. I made myself tea, sat at the dining table, and watched the quiet house. My house. A place I worked decades to own. I thought about the days I saved small amounts, skipped new clothes, and sacrificed everything so my son could have a future. And now that future had walked back into my home without respect. When they finally woke up, they came to the kitchen smiling nervously. Morning, Mom, my son said gently. His wife added, do you need help with anything? I stirred my tea. Yes, I said. Their faces brightened. Pack your things. They froze. My son stepped forward. What? Why? I put the spoon down calmly. Because this house is not your plan B. If you want a stable life, you must build it yourselves. His wife looked shocked. You're kicking us out? I nodded. Not immediately. But soon. They didn't speak. They weren't angry, just exposed. They knew deep down that this day would come. And now it was here. They spent most of the day whispering in their room. I heard bits and pieces, fear, confusion, regret. Around noon, my son approached me alone. Mom. Please. We don't have anywhere else to go. I closed my book and looked at him. You didn't think of that when you moved my things out? He lowered his head. I was wrong. I nodded. Yes. You were. He sat down slowly. We were scared, he admitted. We've been struggling, and we thought living here would help us get on our feet. For the first time, I saw honesty, not manipulation. Why didn't you just tell me? I asked. He sighed. Because I didn't want you to see me failing. That sentence softened something inside me. My son wasn't a bad person, just desperate and reckless. Asking for help is not failure, I said. But taking what isn't yours is. He nodded, tears in his eyes. Can we start again? He asked. I leaned back. Yes. But starting again means owning your mistakes. He wiped his face and whispered, we will. That was the first real step. Later that afternoon, his wife approached me alone. She looked nervous, hands shaking slightly. Can I talk to you? She asked. I nodded. She sat across from me, eyes lowered. I'm sorry, she whispered. I pushed him. I thought moving here would fix everything. I didn't think about how it would hurt you. I studied her quietly. For once, she wasn't pretending. Why didn't you ask instead of assuming? She sighed. I didn't think you'd say yes. I nodded. You're right. I wouldn't have. She cracked a small, embarrassed smile. I guess I knew that. I folded my arms. You two acted like this house was waiting for you. But it wasn't. She nodded quickly. I know. And I'm sorry. I could feel her sincerity. If you both are willing to rebuild trust, I said, then there's a path forward. Her eyes brightened. We are. Truly. She paused. But we'll leave if you want us to. I looked at her steadily. That depends on how you act from now on. She swallowed hard but nodded. A small part of me hoped they meant what they said. Over the next few days, they changed their behavior completely. They cleaned without being asked. They cooked for me. They stopped acting like owners and started acting like grateful guests. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. One morning, I found them sitting at the dining table with notebooks. My son looked up. We're making plans, he said. Real plans. For our own place. They showed me rough sketches, budget lists, job applications, small goals. I was surprised. You're serious, I said. His wife nodded. We want to stand on our own. Not take from you. Hearing that warmed a part of my heart that had been cold for weeks. Good, I said. Independence feels better when you earn it. They smiled. For the first time, the house felt peaceful. Not because everything was fixed, but because everything was honest. That evening, they cooked dinner and insisted I rest. I watched them from the couch, two young people finally understanding responsibility. Maybe this wouldn't end in anger after all. A week later, they came to me with news. We found a small apartment, my son said proudly. His wife added, it's not big, but it's ours. I felt something loosen in my chest. Relief. Pride. Healing. I'm happy for you, I said gently. My son hugged me, something he hadn't done in months. Thank you for not giving up on us, he whispered. I patted his back. I didn't raise you to give up. I raised you to grow up. They laughed softly. Over the next few days, they packed their things, not secretly, not arrogantly, but respectfully. On moving day, I helped them load the car. His wife hugged me too. "Thank you for teaching us," she said. "Thank you for listening," I replied. As they drove away, I stood at the doorway of my house, my home, and breathed deeply. Peace returned to the walls. Silence returned to the rooms. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel weak. I didn't feel taken advantage of. I felt strong. Strong enough to protect what was mine. Strong enough to teach them what they needed. And strong enough to keep moving forward. After they moved out, the house felt different, lighter, safer, calmer. I spent the first day cleaning quietly, not because the place was dirty, but because I wanted to reclaim every corner they had tried to take. As I dusted the shelves, I found some of my old photo frames turned face down, like they had tried to erase parts of me while moving in. I lifted each frame and wiped it carefully. My life, my memories, my story, none of it could ever be moved aside again. That evening, my son called. "We made it," he said. I smiled into the phone. "How does it feel?" "Strange," he admitted. "But good. It feels good." His wife shouted in the background, "We built a home." A small one, but still. I laughed. For the first time, their voices didn't carry entitlement. They carried excitement, hope. After the call, I sat on my porch with a warm blanket over my legs. I realized something important: setting boundaries doesn't push people away. It teaches them how to come closer with respect. They didn't lose me. They were finally learning how to meet me as adults. A few days later, my son came to visit. He actually knocked, and waited for me to open the door. That gesture alone told me everything had changed. He looked happier than before, more grounded. "We found jobs," he said, stepping inside. "Both of us." I smiled proudly. "That's wonderful." He sat on the couch they had once tried to throw away. "Mom, I want to be honest about something." I leaned forward. "Go ahead." He exhaled. "Moving into your house wasn't just desperation. It was pride too. I didn't want people to know we were struggling. I didn't want you to think I failed." My heart softened. "Failure isn't falling down," I said. "It's refusing to get up." He nodded slowly. "I know that now." For the first time in years, we talked without tension. He told me about the apartment: small kitchen, old windows, noisy neighbors, but he sounded grateful, not ashamed. Before he left, he hugged me tightly. "Thank you for giving us a chance to fix things," he whispered. I held him gently. "That's what mothers do. But learning is your job now." His wife visited the next day. She brought groceries, real groceries she paid for herself. "A gift," she said shyly. I raised an eyebrow. "I hope this isn't a bribe." She laughed. "No. Just appreciation." She helped me put everything away. While we worked, she said softly, "I was wrong. I treated this house like a prize, not a home." I glanced at her. She continued, "I was scared of being poor again. I thought if we could live here, everything would magically be okay." I nodded. "Fear makes people do foolish things." She looked down. "Yes. And I was foolish. It takes strength to admit wrong. More strength than pretending." "You're growing," I said. She smiled. "I'm trying." We sat at the table afterward. She told me about their apartment, their plans, their mistakes. She wasn't the same woman who barged in and claimed ownership. She was humbler, wiser, softer. Before she left, she said, "Thank you for not hating us." I smiled gently. "If I hated you, I wouldn't have taught you." She left with a grateful heart, and I felt a quiet peace settle around me. Weeks passed, and the rhythm of life became steady again. My health improved. My house regained its warmth. My relationship with my son and his wife grew healthier, slowly but surely. One afternoon, I visited their apartment. They were proud to show me around. "It's small," my son said, "but it's ours." They had worked hard to furnish it. Second-hand furniture, mismatched dishes, and curtains sewn by his wife with her own hands, but the love in that place was brighter than anything new. "It's beautiful," I said honestly. His wife's eyes sparkled. "We wanted you to see what we've built." Built, not taken. That mattered. We shared a simple meal: rice, beans, and fried fish. It tasted better than anything they had ever cooked in my home, because it was theirs. After dinner, my son walked me to the door. "Mom," he said softly, "thank you for pushing us to stand up." I squeezed his hand. "You did the work. I just opened your eyes." He nodded. "And we won't forget that." One evening, I sat in my living room listening to the quiet. A soft breeze came through the window, carrying memories of the chaos that once filled the house. But now, only peace lived here. I made tea and sat on the porch, watching cars pass by. I thought about everything that had happened: the fear, the disrespect, the confusion, the hurt. But I also thought about the healing, the growth, the lessons. My son called again. "We're doing okay now," he said. "We're saving. We're planning. We're learning." His voice sounded stronger, like a man finding his path. "I'm proud of you," I told him. And I meant it. After the call, I leaned back in my chair. My house was safe. My boundaries were firm. My family was growing in the right direction. Everything had led to this quiet, steady moment where I realized, strength isn't loud. Strength is knowing when to fight and when to teach. And I had. Months passed, and my home settled into a calm rhythm. My son and his wife visited often, but always respectfully. No more loud arguments, no more moving my belongings without asking. They had learned their lessons the hard way. One Saturday morning, they brought flowers. Not for the house, but for me. "Just because," his wife said softly, placing the bouquet on the dining table. I smiled, touched by the small gesture. It wasn't grand, but it carried meaning. I realized that teaching someone respect isn't about shouting or punishing, it's about letting them see consequences and guiding them to grow. We shared tea, and I listened to them talk about their apartment, their work, their savings. They spoke like adults, not entitled children. I felt a quiet pride swell inside me. The house, once a battlefield, had become a space for learning and healing. And I had done it without ever raising my voice or losing my composure. Power isn't about forcing someone to obey. It's about standing firm, letting them stumble, and helping them rise in the right way. They finally understood the balance of respect, independence, and gratitude. One evening, I found myself cleaning the living room, reflecting on how far things had come. The walls no longer carried the tension of entitlement. The furniture was in its rightful place. Even the little scratches on the floor reminded me of the chaos that once existed here, and the strength it took to restore peace. My son knocked and entered, holding a small notebook. "We've been keeping track of our budget and goals," he said. He placed it on the table. "We want to show you we're serious about doing things right." I picked it up and glanced through the pages. Meticulous, thoughtful, detailed, everything my house had taught them indirectly. His wife joined, smiling softly. "We've learned how to plan, how to save, and how to respect what isn't ours," she said. I looked at both of them and nodded. They had transformed. They weren't the same people who barged in uninvited. And I realized, true influence doesn't come from power or money, it comes from quiet strength and patience. My home had become a classroom, and my family had finally graduated. As the months continued, I noticed a new sense of responsibility in them. My son would call before visiting. His wife would ask before borrowing anything. They were building habits of respect and independence. One afternoon, I sat on the porch and watched them leave after helping with groceries. They waved, smiling genuinely. I felt a sense of relief and pride I hadn't known before. The house was no longer a battlefield, but a symbol of lessons learned and boundaries respected. I understood something important: sometimes people need to push limits to realize the rules that guide them. My family had tested me, but they had grown stronger because of it. And I had grown stronger too. I wasn't just the mother who provided, they had finally seen me as someone who could teach, guide, and protect without compromising my dignity. That realization was more powerful than any argument or confrontation could have been. One quiet night, I sat alone, thinking about everything. The hospital stay, their intrusion, the fear, and the eventual change. My house had been tested, and so had I. I reflected on the strength it took to stay calm, to hold the mortgage papers close, to wait for the perfect moment. I realized that patience was my secret weapon. Watching, listening, and letting them reveal their true intentions had been the key. By not arguing, not shouting, and not reacting immediately, I had given them a chance to understand themselves. And they had. My son and his wife weren't perfect, but they had become better. They were no longer driven by entitlement or fear. They were learning responsibility, humility, and gratitude. And I had witnessed the transformation. That quiet reflection brought me a peace I hadn't felt in months. My home, once invaded, was finally mine again, not just physically, but spiritually. And I had done it without ever losing myself. The final chapter of this story didn't require shouting or confrontation. My son and his wife had learned the lessons of respect, boundaries, and independence. My home had returned to its rightful order, and our family had grown wiser. That evening, I walked through every room, remembering the chaos and the fear, the anger and the disappointment, but also the growth, humility, and healing. I realized that true power isn't about showing who's in charge. It's about quietly protecting what is yours, guiding others to understand their mistakes, and giving them the chance to change. My son hugged me before leaving, his voice soft and sincere. "Thank you for teaching us, Mom." His wife added, "We won't forget." I smiled, finally understanding the depth of my own strength. They had thought I was weak. They had thought they could take what wasn't theirs. But I had remained calm, patient, and observant. And in the end, I had protected everything that mattered. My home, my dignity, and the lessons they would carry for the rest of their lives. I had won, not by force, but by knowing my worth and letting time reveal the truth.